Hi everybody, Sydney here. I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about my assessment protocol for my farm to table project. So there are various assessments ongoing throughout my project. So I kind of just split it up into my formative assessments and my summative assessments. So as far as my formative assessments, throughout this process, I'd just be making some observations, questioning the students, which is often what I find myself doing a lot of times in my own classroom. If you're sitting there talking to the student and prompting them with questions, they can really, show you what they know informally in that sense. Um, I'll also have some check-ins set up through Flipgrid where they can kind of respond to certain things, as well as Google Forms. And I really like Google Forms, like this picture here I have to the right, because it gives me that immediate feedback and I can then import it into a Google Sheets and I can keep track of all of my student data. So I can really see where they are, and if a student is really, really struggling with something in particular, I like mostly I do during the regular school day with a lot of my reading and my math concepts, I can pull them back for additional instruction. So to kind of scaffold that teaching and that learning there, I really find Google Forms is a quick tool to just assess them, a great check-in tool. So moving on to summative assessments, I do have a couple, and because this project is generally kind of based off of that project-based learning mindset, and I've spoken about Vygotsky's kind of ideals before, where I'm really trying to get my students to become that more knowledgeable other, as they're learning from more knowledgeable others. I really wanted one of my summative assessments is to really have students look at the whole project. So from start to finish, they're going to design and create a garden at our school. And they're going to, kind of figure out their why for what they're actually going to grow there. They're going to learn about different crops and, what environments they grow in and which one would be best for, or which few would be best for our school garden. They will work on measuring, collecting data. They will harvest these crops, so to speak, and they will provide them to our cafeteria staff to cook and use in some of our meals. So, having them look at that whole project is super important, because there are so many different steps and pieces to that. So, our end goal is to really have food to be able to harvest. So, in a sense, that is one of the summative assessments, as well as up here, I have a recipe book. So, with the crops that they have chosen, students need to either research or speak with a family member or community member or faculty or staff member to come up with a recipe card that includes that ingredient. So these could be, we've talked a lot in my prior lessons where they'll be learning about nutrition and elements and minerals and things that we find in our food that benefit us. So they'll need to pick a healthy dish to include in our community cookbook, which will then be shared at a later time. But they'll be able to do that. So, can they efficiently come up with a recipe to incorporate in our kind of shared book? And then lastly, I want them to really be able to reflect on their work, because I feel like reflection is like just a key piece to this project. And I think that it's a really meaningful kind of assessment. So they will be reflecting on the entire project as a whole through a Flipgrid video. And even though this may not be as like formal as a presentation, this is still, enacting those like early social skills where, that community speaking type aspect there. But they're also going to be able to have to follow a rubric and make sure they have all elements of the rubric answered. So it may, some crops may not turn out as well as others, but I'm very curious to see how students would reflect on their experiences, because, student A's experience may not be the same as student B's, so I think that that's a really, really powerful tool to not only be able to step aside and reflect on your own work, but to be able to hear from other people to see how their opinions and what they learned have been different, like what their takeaways are. So I feel that that is really a great way to get them, not only are we completing that feedback loop, but it is something where the students have the ability to look at their own video, reflect on it, think about things that had gone well, things that had not gone well. So I think that that is probably my most powerful piece in my summative assessment, aside from growing the food itself, is really that reflection piece and my students following that rubric. As always, if anybody has any suggestions or some feedback for me, I would love to hear it. Thanks, everyone.